Are you looking for inspiring conversations about faith, film, and life? You're in the right place. Here's the host who knows the right questions to ask, Father Edward Looney.
Hey everybody, it's Father Edward. Grateful you're tuning in for another conversation. What I love about, email and all of that is I get a lot of press releases somehow, kind of as a podcaster and freelance journalist on the side. I get a lot of different information sent to me, and sometimes I'm very interested in what I receive. Other times I just click delete. And so I got this one that just came up, and it was about the Way of St. Cuthbert, a documentary that's being filmed, and they were refused entry into one of the parks in England. And so I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about St. Cuthbert and the perception of being rejected and all of that today. And so I have Daniel Catone with me to share a bit more about this project. So thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, hello, Father. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to be with you and all of your viewers and listeners today. I'm excited to share the project and the controversies that we have, unfortunately, with the British government.
Yeah. So maybe let's just start out first with how did you get involved with this project? Because I don't think you're the director or something like that, but maybe you're an executive producer, or what's
I'm
your
a man
role?
of limited skills, Father. I actually ran into a professor down at Wyoming Catholic. I live out here in Wyoming, and his name's Dr. Jason Baxter, and he's a professor of beauty and literature at Benedictine College now. So I ran into this gentleman. We became fast friends. He had a great love for the faith, great love for literature, and we just hit it off really well. Family man too. And he approached me about a year and a half ago and offered the opportunity to be an executive producer for a documentary of St. Cuthbert's Way or Trail in England. And that's kind of how we got started.
Okay. So someone else's project, they approached you and
Yeah.
you graciously accepted that. And when it comes to these ways, so you called it the Way of St. Cuthbert, there are different ways. These are just like paths or pilgrim paths. So for example, in England, there's the Walsingham Way, and
Yes.
probably most famously, people know of the El Camino, which
Yes.
is another the Way of St. James. So
Mhm.
this is very common and known, kind of to Catholics who are familiar with walking pilgrimages. But can you just maybe the name St. Cuthbert is very unfamiliar, probably not a household intercessor. So who is St. Cuthbert?
Well, I'd like him to be a household intercessor for us, along with St. Joseph of Arimathea, two of my favorite saints, and kind of unknown in a lot of ways. But St. Cuthbert, I think, is more popular across the pond in England than he is here. He was a medieval monk and an ascetic. He was a very holy man, kind of at the era of Bede in England. And, it's kind of a tumultuous time, Father, because not only do you have the rise of Catholicism and Christianity throughout the British Isles, but that's when the Vikings came. And so the body of Saint Cuthbert was venerated and hidden from the Vikings, and so taken along this parts of this different trail that we ended up hiking on and filming this documentary on.
Okay, so then kind of this pilgrimage route, it emerges.
Yes.
So they hide the body, then they put obviously then after the Vikings, they
Yeah.
must put the body back out for public
Yeah.
veneration and
Yeah.
build a shrine. So how long is the walking path? Like, is it 100 miles? Is it 1,000 miles? Like, what's the
It
sense of
felt
that?
like it sometimes. I was hiking with 6 college students, my 19-year-old son, who's also a videographer in the documentary, along with Christian Holden, who is the guy who actually did all the videography, and then Dr. Jason Baxter and Father Holden. It was really about 62 miles from start to finish, and so we started one day and we finished about 9 days later. We started walking all the way across basically the center of the island of England and got to Holy Island, where St. Cuthbert had a monastery, and got to see his cave, although that was where we had the controversy with the British government because they prohibited our filming of the cave, which was really sad.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit. So Cuthbert was in a cave, and so
Well, his
this cave.
body was.
Okay, and so you're going to where his body was. Now, ordinarily a pilgrim, like if I started, so I hear you say 62 miles, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this is something I could do in my lifetime. Like,
Yes.
that's like 9 miles a day if you do it 7 days a week. So that's
Yeah.
pretty doable, I think.
It is.
And so I could go to this cave,
Yes.
and there would be no problem if I would go. But because
Yeah.
you had a camera with you,
Yeah.
they're like, you can't go.
Yeah, it
And
was really sad, Father. Excuse me for interrupting. I
oh,
get all fired up about this. It was really unfortunate because Christian Holden, I mean, all the people involved in the production of this film, which was now been purchased by EWTN, which is pretty exciting, um, devout, thoughtful Catholics, and all of us were learning about St. Cuthbert, and we're so excited. And one of the pinnacles of the event of this hike and this pilgrimage is getting to St. Cuthbert's cave, and I actually got an email. Christian Holden, our videographer, got an email from the National Trust of the nation of Britain, which is sort of like the National Park Service of sorts, but a private charity that manages all the different sites. And they said it was their policy to prohibit religious filming of their various sites, including St. Cuthbert's cave, which the irony of ironies here, of course, it's our cave of our saint, the great and venerable man, St. Cuthbert. And we are law-abiding folks, and we ended up not professionally filming. I did do a little bit of a sideways filming with my iPhone, like everyone else was doing, and so I do actually have that video of me talking inside the cave. But the National Trust, they prohibited us, and then it turned out that they had been allowing Muslim pilgrims to do the same thing with their filming at St. Cuthbert's cave. And so our videographer, Christian Holden, brought it up to the media, and he got interviewed by the BBC, the Telegraph, and now I'm getting interest here in the United States. And I'm actually meeting with the folks from the National Trust this week because they have come out publicly and said it's not their policy to prohibit these types of films, even though they said it was in writing, which was very confusing. And so I'm hoping to change their mind and allow filming there and bring America's sense of religious freedom over to the Brits.
So that means you're going to have to get on a plane and go back and film professionally again. So an added expense to the whole project.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And my hope is, Father, that in conversation, see, this is kind of the nice thing. I own a company called Arimathea, and we do a lot of advocacy towards corporations where we try to get them to change their behavior. And so I have some experience in trying to get people of maybe middling faith or no faith at all to sort of see the light of reason and allow religious freedom and expression and these types of things. And so I'm going to be negotiating with the British government this week and the National Trust. And my objective is for them to issue a public statement that specifically states that any religious person with any purpose whatsoever is allowed to film at the various religious sites across the nation of Great Britain. And I'm optimistic. I hope that they will do so and that we don't have to file suit in the United Kingdom, but I'm prepared to do so.
Now, as a professional, when you're filming, I know sometimes you have to fill out paperwork in advance and get the necessary permissions. So like that's what you would have to do. It wasn't like you hadn't done the necessary things. It was just you were rejected outright.
Rejected outright. I mean, the email was very explicit. It said it is our policy to prohibit any filming of our sites if there's a religious film being made or that type of thing. And it was just really, really disappointing. But I think, Father, we've all heard about the oppression of Christians in the United Kingdom and sort of this bias that's happening throughout their nation towards atheism and sort of this woke culture that we are kind of, I think, rejecting here in the United States, and also the rise of Islam in the United Kingdom. And I think our friends of Islamic faith might even agree with us that it doesn't matter what your religious preference is. You should be permitted to film, especially your own religious sites.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so on this whole journey then, so there's a starting point of the way of St. Cuthbert, and then where's the end? Was the end this cave or the end is a shrine?
Well, I think the end is heaven, Father. We're all on this pilgrimage, but
the telos.
I'm being a little cheeky, but in all seriousness, it begins in Scotland. You walk through Scotland, you cross the border, that kind of back and forth of Scotland and England, and they're two separate countries. I don't fully understand all their political divisions there, and they probably look at us and like, Wyoming, Montana, what's the difference? But in all seriousness, you walk for 62 miles, and one of the stops along the way is St. Cuthbert's Cave, which is a little inland. And so there's a final destination that you try to reach, which we did reach, and we have some beautiful cinematography for the movie with the scores and everything, of a place called Holy Island. And it's a little island on the eastern side of England, in the towards Europe there. And this was what's crazy. The tide goes out, and you have to walk, I don't know, maybe it's 2 miles across the sand to get to the island. Now there's a causeway now you can drive out on, but if you get caught in the tide, your car gets washed away. So it's very serious. So we get to the island. There's the ruins of St. Cuthbert's Monastery that were there, and it's Saint Aidan. He was also there. Of course, Saint Bede and some of the more famous English saints, all in this little tiny area. It's sort of like the Saint Patrick of England. The island is really cool. The ruins of the monastery are fantastic. You can actually see artifacts behind me. So I love artifacts. I've been all over the world collecting artifacts and seeing ancient ruins, and this is really special. And they have active digs going on there. And so we hiked for the 62 miles, and then we kind of end at this place with this little inn on this little island next to the monastery, and it was really quite special.
So there's a special spot of prayer then, is there a statue or something like that of St. Cuthbert?
There is no that's a great question. Gosh, maybe there should be, but there's no statue of St. Cuthbert. I think there's a statue of St. Aidan on Holy Island, but you come inland from Holy Island to get to the cave where they hid St. Cuthbert's body during the Viking invasions. They had to get away from the coast because that's where the Vikings were. It's a very humble place. The cave is small, I would say, but it immediately evokes the memory of Isaiah. I think it's Isaiah in the cave, right? When he hears the still small voice of our Lord. It felt like that. It was just really cool. So I hope everybody has a chance to see it. And if you can't see it physically, we have this movie coming out with EWTN that we're going to be releasing for free for everybody. It's about 35 minutes long. And it's all about these 6 college students, including my son and myself, hiking into 62 miles and just asking us questions along the way. But Professor Baxter, he really wanted to create kind of an icon, but in movie form. And so the visuals are like take your breath away beautiful, tremendous music, just gorgeous music, to sort of help transport folks to the way of St. Cuthbert without having to do the actual pilgrimage. A lot of folks that can't do 62 miles. And so us, spry folks, we did, and we get to share it with all the folks that are interested.
So when you started and where you finished, did you walk the whole thing, or did somebody pick you up and transport you 10 miles here or there?
No, we had to walk. You have
backpacks, you have all of your things. Yeah. So it's just like the Way of St. James then.
Yes, it's very similar.
And where did you stay? So if it took you 10 days, 6, 7,
Don't say that. My son told me I'm not allowed to say that. It's very cringy for us older guys.
I see.
But no, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So for the number of days that you do it, so do you there's hostels along the way, or you stay at hotels, or where do you stay?
Well, because I was the executive producer, I got to choose, what level of comfort we'd have on the actual pilgrimage, and I am a very soft and weak man, and so I chose these very comfortable inns. And so we would hike for 10 miles or so, and we'd end up in this little tiny village, and there'd be this little tiny inn, and they'd make us a little dinner or something like that. We'd stay there and shower up and put the backpacks back on and hike back out, and it's just so beautiful landscape wise, Father. It's rolling hills, Scottish heathers. We were very fortunate with weather. I think we might have had drizzle one day, maybe, or two. It really wasn't so bad. Probably the highlight of all of that was the first day we were shooting. We were in Scotland, and Jason Baxter was very excited about our first shots. And my son had brought his drone over from the United States with all the cameras and everything. And we ended up having to cross, I think it was the River Tweed, if I'm not mistaken. And while we're crossing it, we're on this huge, expansive bridge, a footbridge. And it's like 40-mile-an-hour winds. And so the bridge is swaying. We've got the drones barely able to hold their own in the weather. But it sort of was a dramatic beginning to a fairly relaxing walk for the rest of the 60 miles or so that we did.
Oh. Now, as you made the journey, was there a specific intention that you had, not only just for the show and for the viewers and all of that, but were you carrying some sort of, spiritual intention along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, Father, my biggest intention was to do this with my son. So my son and I, we've traveled all over the world together. We'd actually never been on a religious pilgrimage before. And so this was our opportunity now as men. He's 19 now, coming up here in a couple weeks. And we got to together do this entire event. And there was another intention. My son was homeschooled his whole life. And we were with 6 college students from Benedictine College, and they're all in the Professor Baxter's beauty program. And so having him be able to interact with men and women of his age in a class type setting with a professor, with me tagging along, the old dad in the back, kind of keeping up. That was the real intention, is just for my son and I to have this time together with the Lord.
Oh, that's beautiful. When you made this pilgrimage journey and trek, anything surprise you along the way as you were making the route? Like, did you come across, sometimes like I'm driving and when I went to Italy a few months ago, I told some
Oh,
people, I'm like, I just want to stop at a random church in some random out of the way city and just see what it's like, So
yeah.
like, I don't know, was there anything surprising that you came across as you made your way?
Yeah, I would say there are 2 things which I came across which were surprising. I knew I would enjoy it. Like, 62 miles, it's not nothing. It was adventurous, and I'm kind of athletic, and I was very surprised by how joyful the experience was with all of the people involved. Um, when you get a dozen or so Catholics together who are on fire for the Lord and are all doing like a common goal together,
Mm.
there's sort of this dozen Catholics like the apostles. There's this common goal, but it's also a shared joy that you have along the way. And I was a little surprised that I didn't get hurt. I was expecting like hurt my ankle or something like that. Didn't hurt myself at all. But I would say that that common joy of the experience that we had together as we went through this was surprising. The other thing that I thought was very surprising was how interested and the locals were in St. Cuthbert's Way and St. Cuthbert's and what these Americans were doing, and how little they knew about St. Cuthbert. I mean,
Ah.
these are people who lived within a mile or 2 of the trail and knew nothing about him. And so the film, I'm hoping, is an opportunity to give back to England to say, here's something that we made for you to learn about your
Yeah.
own saint.
Well, I live in the state of Wisconsin. I'm a priest of the Diocese of Green Bay. And, there are so many people in our own diocese who haven't been to the Marian apparition site in Champion. I was the pastor of a parish that was only 15 miles
Yeah.
from the site. And I was taking parishioners there for the very first time. They had never been. So I kind of can relate. Like, you have this, they have a saint, we have an apparition, but like it's in your
Yes.
backyard, and we don't have as much of an appreciation maybe as we should, or maybe we take it for granted, or we hear the stories. Um, Along the way, then, so here you are, the crazy Americans walking this, the locals are talking about you or
Yes.
whatever, but are there other pilgrims? Did you, if you walk the way of St. James, you
Mhm.
come across many different pilgrims. And I've heard stories of priests who walked the way and
Yeah.
how they've interacted and conversed with other pilgrims. So was there anybody else that was walking when you were?
Hiking, not pilgrimaging. We would occasionally run across somebody who was hiking the trail in some pieces, perhaps not the whole thing. But I actually didn't meet a single pilgrim other than our group along the entire way. It's 62 miles with destinations. And, if we talk about like the new evangelization, sort of reintroducing Christ to a world that's forgotten him, this is an excellent example of that. And I think our experience with the British government, you know, persecuting us in a small way, one that's awesome, sign me up because our Lord is persecuted. So if I get a little tiny piece of persecution, I mean, this is wonderful.
Mm.
But it's a nation in a lot of ways that has forgotten our Lord. And I think that's true in the United States in some ways, but it was very much apparent in England and Scotland, that this is a post-Christian world that we were walking into. And we were like a dozen antibodies that entered into this space. And so we would pray in public, we'd pray up on the hillsides, we'd sing songs along the way, sing on the hillsides. And people would look at us like we were aliens. I mean, we are because we're Americans there, but also aliens from another place, heaven, because this is not our true home, right? And so that was kind of a cool thing that people they'd be interested in what we're doing. We tell them what we're doing, and they're like, "Oh, that's really cool," and they, give us well wishes, and we might pray together or something like that. But, in fact, my son lost his iPhone along the hike up on a hill. Yeah, it was crazy. We were in the middle of nowhere. He lost his iPhone, and we started looking for it for about 20 minutes or so until I called the phone again, and it somehow went through, which 1/10 of a bar. And somebody picked it up, and it was another fellow hiker. And so he gave us the phone, and we told him a little bit about St. Cuthbert. And so we traded.
Wow, that's a cool story. Hopefully that makes it into the show.
I think so.
Yeah. So the way of St. Cuthbert, it's pretty ancient. Cuthbert lived a very long time ago. And so a lot of people have been making this trek, this journey for years, for centuries. So what's it like to think of the fact, and maybe as you tell the story, maybe that's the beginning, or you talk about some of the early pilgrims or descriptions or something, but what's it like to think like, I'm walking this and other people have done this before me, saints have done this before me, and after me there's going to be people, and now there's going to be more people because you're telling people they should go do it.
Yes, that is actually, I mean, isn't that like the story of our own communion, that we're surrounded by this cloud of witnesses? And so as we're along this trail, this small group of people, we have our angels with us, we have the saints cheering us along. That's a beautiful thing to think about. Even St. Cuthbert praying for us, my own patron saint, St. Joseph of Arimathea, praying for me in my journey. It's very humbling. But I will say what's more humbling, Father, is St. Cuthbert was very much known for his penance and for his eschewing of all comfort. He was known to go out into the ocean at Holy Island and stand in the tide all night, praying, in just his underwear or something, in the cold and extreme. And this would lead him to his visions. And so the way I saw the 62-mile hike of St. Cuthbert's Way was like a small participation in his rejection of comfort. And so, while I was certainly comforted by the natural beauty and the company and the prayer and everything else was going along with this, it was arduous. I mean, we were hiking up tough hills, and that it required a little bit of training in advance. And so I felt that it was like a unification that we had with him in his penances with our own hike.
Well, you mentioned St. Cuthbert had visions. Can you tell us anything about those visions?
Yeah, his most famous was early in his conversion. He was kind of a rough and tumble kid. He was very athletic. He was kind of like a wrestler kind of kid, probably getting into fights. I would think kind of like St. Peter, just a little rough around the edges, which the Lord loves. He loves a rough stone, I think. And St. Cuthbert, when he was instructed early on, he had a vision where he saw the soul of his mentor, Saint Aidan, going up a heavenly ladder to heaven when he died. When he was dying, Saint Cuthbert and him decided to spend the last days together. It wasn't a vision per se. And they said, "Well, what should we do?" And they said, "Well, let's read the Gospel of John." And so they read the Gospel of John together as brothers for the last few days of his life, and his mentor, his trainer in spirituality, passed on. But they had that time together. So the vision of the ladder is very famous with the soul, and then his experience of St. John's Gospel, while certainly not miraculous in a traditional sense, I could imagine two saints together reading St. John. Beautiful.
Well, I've learned a lot about St. Cuthbert just from our conversation today.
Good. Mission accomplished.
Right? Yeah, I can't say that I knew too much about him. I've heard the name before, but that was about it. But a greater appreciation for who he is, for sure. And as you make this documentary, obviously people are going to come to know him more. And so
Yes.
you're really playing a role in the promotion of his cult
Thank you.
and devotion to him. So uh, tell us, when do you expect the documentary is going to come out? Sometime in 2026?
Yeah, actually, it's done. We've edited it, we've got it already. EW10's going. We made a special version just for them so they can put it on the TV. That should be coming out here in the next month or so. So everybody can look out for that. We're gonna do some PR around it. But if I could just make sure everybody that's listening and watching this can bring prayer to this battle. Because we really want to change the hearts of the National Trust in Britain. I think if we can get them to not discriminate against Christians who want to visit at their own holy sites, what a win this would be. Yes, it's St. Cuthbert's Way, and yes, the movie is awesome, but how awesome would it be if the movie somehow changed the direction of the British government in this small way, to allow Catholics to venerate their saints in their holy places? That's what we really need to be praying for.
It's like another great, if that happens, it's another grace received through the
Yes.
intercession of St. Cuthbert. Like
Yes.
all of this had to take place so that could happen.
Yeah,
So,
St. Cuthbert, ora pro nobis.
yeah, well, wonderful. So thank you so much, Daniel Catone, for joining me today and just sharing about this documentary. I am looking forward to watching it and seeing the beauty of both England and Scotland and just the pilgrimage journey and all that unfolds. So
Well,
I hope
thank you.
others will give it a watch when it comes out.
Well, thank you very much, Father. This has been a wonderful time with you, and I hope everyone gets to see the documentary when it's released. I'll shoot over the link to you, and you can put it up on your podcast for people to check out too.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Father.
If you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. And don't forget to stay up to date with what Father Edward is doing by following him on Facebook or Instagram at the handle @FrEdwardLooney. Thanks for listening, and please join Father Edward again next time for another inspiring conversation.